Recently, we traveled to the Republic of Singapore, a small, culturally diverse, and highly successful city-state. In less than 50 years, Singapore has transformed itself into one of the most dynamic and productive countries in Southeast Asia. With limited resources but an openness to innovation, the government has helped make Singapore an ideal place to live, work, and play. This is America visits the Republic of Singapore. This is America is made possible by the National Education Association, the nation's largest advocate for children and public education. The American Federation of Teachers, a union of professionals. The Singapore Tourism Board. There's something for everyone. Singapore Airlines, a great way to fly. Punsan Corporation, forging a higher global standard. The CTC Foundation, AFO Communications, and the Rotondaro Family Trust. Singapore is one of the most important countries in the world today. It's not only location, but it's an English-speaking country with a solid infrastructure. On this program, we'll find out why Singapore is key to doing business in the region and why Asia is so important to America's trade policy. Whether you're shopping on Orchard Road, the Fifth Avenue of Singapore, or you're downtown at lunchtime, you can't help but notice the multinational companies, especially American, which are here. We spoke with Michael Zink of Citi.
Singapore, a must for Citi?
Critical. Our single largest operation, Asia Pacific, we have 9,700 employees here. In Singapore. We're the largest employer in financial services in Singapore. To give you a sense, we employ more people here even than the big domestic banks because we have a collection of businesses. Big businesses domestically, corporate banking, private banking. Our consumer bank has 1 million credit cards outstanding in Singapore, and there's only 4.8 million people.
Yes.
and on top of these domestic businesses, we have regional businesses that serve all of Asia. Our global markets, which would be foreign exchange, interest rate derivatives, commodity businesses based here in Singapore. A lot of our transaction services for our multinational clients that pay and collect around the region based here in Singapore. Private banking for Asia, and this is the part of the world generating more millionaires than anywhere else today, based in Singapore. And finally, we also have one of our most important centers of excellence for our technology and our processing. And as you, I'm sure, understand today, the world is digitizing, and our business is digitizing more quickly than most. So the ability to process transactions, process and protect data is critical to success in financial services. So our main data center for Asia Pacific and our biggest processing center serving about 45 countries. So it's more than just Asia, here in Singapore.
You've got three core businesses, corporate, and these multinationals, personal banking, you've got banks all over the place, ATMs all over the place. So it's corporate, it's personal banking, and then this other area which is maybe a little bit over my head, but you're a bank as well, right? And that has a different connotation than just going to the teller and making a deposit or a withdrawal.
That's right. There's two big streams financing this economic growth, financing the corporations, financing the governments that are putting in place the infrastructure that allow the economies to grow. That's a big part of what we do in corporate and investment banking. On the other side, as Asia becomes wealthy, there's more wealth to manage.
Wealth management.
Wealth management is the other key stream for us.
What's next for Citi as we head to the finish line here in Singapore and in Asia?
Asia is the single most important region for us today. It generates about 1/3 of our global business. And that, again, let's be careful. That'll get me in trouble. Every region in the world is very important to us. But our positioning in Asia reflects its position in the global economy. One of the beliefs, the received wisdom, if you will, Dennis, is that the center of gravity for the economic global economy, the global economy's center of gravity, is shifting this way. And it doesn't mean that the US and Europe is less important than ever, but with the growth rates in Asia so much higher, the percentage of the global economy that will be based in Asia will rise. The US grows at 3%, Asia grows at 6%. It's arithmetic. As that center of gravity shifts this way, there's more trade, there are more derivatives, there's more economic flows, there's a greater mass of wealth to manage, and our business needs to grow in line with that. So Asia, already very important to Citi's presence and deeply rooted in our past, will become increasingly important to our future.
Singapore, good place to do business, a good place to work?
Singapore is as fine a place to do business as there is anywhere in the world, and that's not an exaggeration. It is a secure place. The infrastructure is first world and first class. The policymakers are forward-looking and they understand the business. It's got a great lifestyle, wonderful weather, schools. It's an urban center that's been carefully planned. It's a lovely place to live. It's a great place to work. And Singapore, again, has built all of this in one and a half generations. If you go back to Singapore on the day I was born in the late 50s, Singapore wasn't even independent in 1958. And today, they're a powerhouse. Singapore is not an emerging market. Singapore is a financial services center as sophisticated, hand on heart I say to you, as sophisticated as New York or London. It has the regulatory framework, the collection of talent, the processing capabilities, the platforms, all the infrastructure, all the software to match toe-to-toe the best financial centers in the world. That may come as a surprise to people at home. That doesn't mean that the financial centers in New York and London are about to disappear. That's just not true. It just means one more competitor has risen up. And that's part of the story of Asia. Fast economic growth that has translated into better quality of life for hundreds of millions of people, sustainable economic growth, and a sophistication that's, again, not fully visible to everybody in what we used to describe as the West.
One of the biggest projects in Singapore ever, in size, scope, investment, and construction, is the Marina Bay Sands Integrated Resort. It's a city within a city, and its dramatic presence leaves a visitor speechless. It's all here: hotel, mall, casino, museum, restaurants, shops, and even a sky park. People were told, come for the weekend and never leave. We spoke with the CEO of Marina Bay Sands.
Well, I think that Singapore, with some of the new leadership that has come into power in the past several years, has taken a view towards the future, which is something that is traditionally done. No country does a better job of planning for the future or positioning itself to be competitive. And part of the key to Singapore's success is to be nimble and recognize that the environment is changing, and therefore Singapore needs to change as well.
So the Sands came to the government, came to Singapore?
Singapore, back in 2004, 2005, was considering this opportunity to open up to integrated resort operators. We already had developed a position in Macau at that point in time. We opened the Sands there in 2004 and had already engaged in a very ambitious development plan there. And when the opportunity to bid for this location opened up, we came in and fought for that opportunity. Unfortunately, came out successful, and as a result of it, we're able to develop the Marina Bay Sands here in downtown Singapore. As you can see, the location we have here, all eyes are upon it. We're in the midst of the the central business district, but also situated next to all this emerging hospitality and tourism infrastructure. And given that we have the bay on one side and the new gardens by the bay on the other side, the view of our property is never going to be blocked. Right. And so it needed to be something substantial and significant. And we think that Moshe Safdie, as our architect, created something that will last for a long time.
So we have three, what would you call them? Three columns, three
hotel towers.
3 hotel towers with a
Sky Park on top.
Sky Park up
Yeah.
top. We're going to talk about each one of those. How many people were involved in the building? Were there other countries coming in as constructor? How did it work out?
Well, it's Singapore's largest private sector development project in its history, both in terms of its size and the investment. And so with something that big, we really had to divide it up into separate pieces of work. So we didn't have a single general contractor. We had about 350 construction management people that were part of our team at Las Vegas Sands that managed this team of contractors that we employed. But we carved it up into different size pieces. The single biggest contract was over $1 billion. That went to Sangyong Construction Company out of Korea, and they built our 3 hotel towers here. But had a lot of great companies from around the world involved in it. At our peak during the construction phase, we had 15 or 16,000 laborers on site. So it was almost a miniature city here, right on our piece of land. Tremendous logistics challenges. The site conditions were difficult given that it was reclaimed land and marine soil, and so it was really quite an accomplishment to get this thing open, the first phase of it in a little over 3 years.
3 years. Do I recall correctly, 57 stories?
Well, the hotel towers are 55 stories, and then on top of that you have space that sits between the top of the hotel towers and the bottom of the Sky Park, where we have a spa and a gym, and we're in the process of designing the build-out on the third one now. But then on top of that, where you have the Sky Park, it's essentially the height of 60 stories in the air, and really spectacular views up there. You look one direction and you see the sea, you look the other direction and you see Marina Bay and the city skyline. But the Sky Park is something that really is just jaw-dropping.
I read someplace it was a $5 to $7 billion investment. Which of those figures is correct?
Depends on what currency you're talking about.
Yeah, well, that's why I gave you both figures to work with.
We're probably around 5.7 billion US dollars, maybe a little bit more than that. So it makes it the most expensive pure tourism development in the world.
Modern business needs cutting-edge technology and an infrastructure that's always ahead of its time. Singapore is clearly built for progress.
We've got a very pragmatic, efficient, and if I may say, very clean government, which has got tremendous foresight, long-term in its planning, excellent vision, able to see things that perhaps many other countries in Asia have not been able to see. And one of the opportunities they saw was in financial services, and they set in place the infrastructure for Singapore to do extremely well on that front. So today we are the 4th largest foreign exchange trading center in the world. On a daily basis, you got about US $250 billion in forex trading going on in Singapore. We're one of the largest fund management centers in Asia. We've got more than US $1 trillion in assets being managed out of Singapore. We've got the busiest port in the world, you know. So I think the government has done a lot in terms of developing this. You have to remember, Singapore was a country with nothing. We had no resources. Everything you see today was built through sound government policies and through a concerted effort to make sure that everything works.
Is Infocom a made-up word?
Well, it's a joint of 2 words, information and communications.
Perfect. So that comes together. Is the country wired?
We are in the process of entirely wiring up to what we call the last mile, which is fiber optics to every single home and every single business. Today we are about 70% already covered.
The country has really made a commitment as far as building an incredible infrastructure to support business, huh? And that's why Singapore is such an important business hub.
Yes. So for us, really looking at Singapore as a hub, being connected everywhere. Within Singapore, we need to be highly connected because a lot of internet traffic can then be interchanged and spread out. And for many other businesses, being connected to the rest of the world, doing businesses with the rest of the world, and being able to provide services to the rest of the world also is a question of very high-speed connectivity.
And how does that show up as far as day-to-day for the average citizen? How does it show up as far as business is concerned?
The way we see going forward is that Infocom will become a very fundamental and underlying technology that streams across every facet of life and business. So for the ordinary man in the streets, they look at handphones. Behind every single transmitter receiver will be a fiber, so that we can get the high speeds of connectivity. And behind kiosks and behind, even at home when we use broadband access, that's a fiber somewhere. For businesses, more will be connected into the rest of the world with very high-speed data access. We see a lot more services going on through the internet to businesses. So therefore, underlying this will be very, very high-speed connectivity.
What would you say are the pillars of the success of the economy?
Well, we started off as a trading country, so trade is very much a part of, is at the core of our economy. And even over the years, as the trade diminished in importance, is still able to maintain, together with transport, about a quarter of the economy. Then we diversify into manufacturing. We've managed to maintain manufacturing, contributing another quarter of the economy. And another quarter is provided by the financial services and business services. The other 25% would be miscellaneous services, for example, healthcare, education, construction, tourism, information technology, and government services.
Do you have any sense of how many multinational companies are based here?
Well, the numbers vary. The traditional numbers that we have for the multinational companies from US, Europe, will run into 7,000 to 10,000.
Whoa. The workforce here is very diverse, isn't it? We have the citizens, we have expats who are here, people who have immigrated, workers from outside other countries. How does that all kind of gel? Because Singaporeans, I know, are famous for saying that the people are the natural resource.
Well, first of all, Singaporeans, we try to allow them to reach their potential through education. But there's always never enough of us. Singaporeans are not reproducing enough, and therefore there's a shortage of workers, shortage of people. So we adopt an open door policy to allow foreign talent and foreign workers who can contribute to the economy and contribute to life in Singapore to come in and work. And as you say, that gives us a wide diversity of people and talent working in Singapore.
Do you think that Singapore is a good place to work?
I think so, and I think the fact that we have so many foreign talent and foreign workers in Singapore shows that our open door policy works for us and for them too.
Right at the top of our conversation, you alluded to imports and exports and manufacturing specifically. What's manufactured here that is exported abroad?
Well, we know we are very small and our manufacturing has to be very focused. So we concentrate on a few sectors. Traditionally, we have been very competitive in the electronic sector and the precision engineering sector. So that contributes nearly 10% of our GDP. We have also built up Singapore as oil refining, and from there we progressed to petrochemical and now downstream specialty chemicals. In year 2000, we decided to build up the pharmaceutical, the biomedical sciences sector. So that contributes another 5% of our GDP. Petrochemical is slightly less than 5%. We've also been successful because of our location to build up ourselves as a transport hub. So transport engineering, shipbuilding, building of rigs, as well as maintenance, repair and overhaul of aircraft. So that capitalize on our location. And of course, we have general manufacturing that caters for our local needs, food, manufacturing.
What's the nature of the relationship with the United States? How important is that?
The U.S. is very important to us. Traditionally, in the past, the U.S. has been our second trading partner to Singapore. And in U.S., you may be surprised, we are your 10th largest export market. So we think we are also significant to your exporters. The U.S. is very important to us in terms of investment. It's one of the biggest foreign investor in Singapore. If you drive around Singapore, you see the presence of many familiar U.S. names.
What's your biggest challenge?
Well, my biggest challenge is to create good quality jobs for Singaporeans, and that means we have to bring in investments because the economy is always constantly restructuring. Some parts of the economy will become uncompetitive over time and will have to be given up. So you need new sectors to be built up, creating new jobs, and you have to train the workers to take on these new jobs, not just workers who are starting employment after school, but also training of existing workers in mid-career. As the jobs are restructured, as there's changes, you have to retrain them to take on the new jobs that are available. So that's a constant challenge for us, because a person may change jobs 4, 5, 6 times in his career, and you've got to constantly help him make those adjustments.
Asia, not Europe or South America, is now recognized as the #1 business target for U.S. companies abroad. We spoke with Cynthia Owens of the American Chamber of Commerce in Singapore to learn why AmCham is critical to U.S. business and how it works in Singapore and Asia.
American Chamber of Commerce has been here for 38 years. We have 700 members who are many of the largest American companies that you've heard of, as well as some small American companies that are based here. We have about 4,500 members, and we really represent business in Singapore, but also business in the region, because so many of our members actually have regional responsibilities across Asia Pacific.
So give us a range of the businesses and maybe some of the names we might know and some of the names we might not know.
Well, it's going to be all the big companies that you've heard of: Citibank, American Express, IBM, Cisco, all of the biggest companies that you hear about in the United States. But it's also going to be small companies. It's small companies that do a variety of things. There is a company here that imports parts from small technology companies in the U.S. to be distributed throughout Asia for different technology makers. So it's a whole range, as well as people, and there are many Americans who come over here to start their own companies.
How does AmCham on a day-to-day, week-to-week, year-to-year basis help U.S. companies function here?
Our goal is really to work on a couple of levels. One is on the government level. So for a couple of years ago, we helped support and push through the free trade agreement between Singapore and the United States, which has been very helpful for U.S. companies. We also work whenever there's things that are big regulations or small. So it could be something on trade or tax policy, or it could be something on creating more schools in Singapore so that American families, when they come here, have a school that they want to send their children to.
You mentioned the Singapore-U.S. FTA agreement. You know, the big thing there is people are frightened that the jobs are going to go overseas and it's going to cost American jobs. That opening up a market through a free trade agreement can actually sell more goods, make it easier to create more jobs at home because you're going to sell in a different way abroad. Can you kind of address that a little bit?
Yeah, that's certainly been our experience with the Singapore Free Trade Agreement, that is actually increased trade between the two. It's hard with such a small economy to say that's created so many jobs anywhere. But yes.
But it's a market.
It's a market, indeed. And in fact, what we found in other free trade agreements is that suddenly, as an American, you can buy things that you couldn't buy before there. And most of our companies are in complete support of these FTAs and in really opening up trade. And trade is the future. We are a globalized world, and you know that more here than almost anywhere else. And without trade, we're not going to be part of that.
Special thanks to the staff of the Fullerton Hotel in Singapore and the Embassy of Singapore in Washington. For information about my new book, The Chance of a Lifetime, and online video for all This Is America programs, visit our website, thisisamerica.net. This is America is made possible by the National Education Association, the nation's largest advocate for children and public education. The American Federation of Teachers, a union of professionals. Punsan Corporation, forging a higher global standard. The CTC Foundation, AFO Communications, and the Rotendaro Family Trust.